So I'd like to talk a little bit about this notion of constructivist learning.
Yeah.
And this is a really important concept in here. And can you just unpack that concept for us a little bit? What is constructivist learning as you
Sure.
understand it?
Basically, the idea is that you learn as you go. You learn by doing. You're expected to, uh, it's expected to take some time, which is why I think in some cases schools don't do a very good job of this because they're on a very quick timetable. They need people to learn things quickly.
Mhm.
Um, but in constructivist learning, you have some time to play, to experiment, to kind of create your own learning as you go along. And it's a concept that's been around forever. I mean, it's nothing new. I'm not an expert in this at all, but I remember in school learning about Piaget,
Mhm.
and even who else?
Dewey, yeah,
Vygotsky,
yeah,
who's
yeah,
we
yeah,
talked about scaffolding
yeah,
learning.
yeah.
Um, and so these guys knew even way back then that you learn as you go by little pieces at a time, putting pieces together rather than somebody just telling you, here's the way it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's you're experimenting and you're exploring and you're figuring it out for yourself
Mhm.
with some guidance. And
Mhm.
that's where
Mhm.
good learning design comes in. If someone
Mhm.
is designing the experience properly, they're providing some guardrails, but then they're giving you opportunities to figure stuff out on your own.
Mhm.
I think that's what it
Mhm.
basically means.
And it's moving us higher up that Bloom's taxonomy of learning, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's getting us more to that individual process of where the person's getting involved in the creation of their own learning, and they feel
Yeah.
there's more intrinsic motivation to do the
Yes.
work, right? And it's not some kind of external force telling you you better learn your math. It's that I feel empowered to learn this because I see the benefit myself.
Hmm. Much
Yeah.
more yeah, much more personal satisfaction
Hmm.
figuring something out than just memorizing something.
And so to apply this to games, I mean, we see this all the time where you have to learn a progressive set of skills in order to achieve, to fight the boss battle, to get across the valley, to build a certain device in order to accomplish a goal. And every moment of that is an opportunity to interject some kind of learning moment. You know.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like you to provide some commentary on the different kinds of games. And this is kind of what we see on page 22 to page 25. We get this kind of list of games in here. And can you help us understand how to approach some of the different affordances that with these different kind of game styles have?
Yeah. I really liked this part of the article because it's not necessarily listing types of games. It's listing or it's describing how games can be used or the purpose of these games, and
Hmm.
then giving examples of games that kind of do that. So what I won't go through each one, but what I love about it is, and I also think there's overlap in these categories. They're not just totally distinct, but it really opened my mind to new ways that games can be used. I think a lot of this class that you're teaching can be found between this first category and the last category. This is,
Mm.
you're talking about, like, for example, games as authoring systems.
Hmm.
It's the idea that you're producing something in the game. You're creating something. The outcome of the play is a tangible thing that you can show, that you can describe, that you can talk about. So, that's one way games can be used. In the Sims, or Sim City, you're creating a city.
Absolutely.
And then you can describe why you made certain choices about this city, and or how you created, the life of your Sims. All of those are based on models that, that require choices. So that's one example. Then
Hmm.
you've got games as content systems where you're actually learning material, you're learning content.
Hmm.
Um, Assassin's Creed, you might actually learn about, ancient Rome, or or the Renaissance, or it's at least a jumping off point, and to learn about those things.
Hmm.
Games as manipulating systems. It's the idea that you're messing with stuff, you're changing variables, you're moving things around to see what the result is. That's we talked about Portal before. That might be a good example of a game as a manipulating system. But games as trigger systems. I like this one too, because within the game, you're not necessarily learning specific facts or ideas or concepts, but it inspires you to learn more about something. So it might be a game about World War II, but then you get really interested in World War II and you start reading about it, or you take a totally different perspective into your history class because you've played this game. And the last one I'll mention is games as reflective systems, because I do think that's one of the most important ways that games can be used in learning. Is not that I think I've said this before, but you're not necessarily learning in the game, or you might be learning in the game, but that's not the total goal. The goal is to experience the game, to enjoy the game, to get engaged by the game, and then later step back and say, whoa, what did we just do?
Right.
What did we learn from it? Why did we do X, Y, and Z? So it's reflecting on the game, afterwards.
Yeah, and there's a lot that you said that's really excellent. And one of the things that I really want to touch on, and that is, I think one of the issues we've seen with educational games, quote unquote, is that they focus too hard on trying to teach content. Like, you have to learn this for purpose of memorization, right? And what happens is that people rebel against that. They feel, well, first, don't manipulate me, right?
Yeah.
And second, I don't. This is boring. Third, why do I have to do this? And then that's the opposite. That's the antithetical feeling that we want people to have. You're talking about enjoyment. You're talking about an experience. That's the on-ramp to education, not people getting off because they got turned off by learning. And I think that's one of the reasons why, and I think some of the articles, and I can't remember off the top of my head which one, talked about one of the problems that educational games had was that they were designed too strictly within this notion of you have to teach facts and content, and not, let me give you an enjoyable experience. And then, by the way, we might sneak in some learning there that you feel more positive and you want to come back to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the future of learning games has a lot to do with reflection, and the role of the teacher and the role of your fellow players discussing what happened in the simulation or the game.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And the last one is thinking a little bit about location, student designers thinking about location-based games or play anywhere games. And we talked about this just a little bit in some of our conversations about having kind of the casual gamers that I can just pull out the phone and I could just play my game for 2 minutes while I'm waiting for a phone call or something's happening, or I'm in the dentist office or whatever. And the different affordances, and how should they be thinking about location-based gaming versus play anywhere?
Yeah,
that's a good way to think about that.
Well, when I think about location-based gaming, I can't help but think about augmented reality. And that I think a lot of people who look at games and education really look to augmented reality as being the holy grail of what's possible, because you can imagine just being anywhere out in the world, but being able to interact with what you're seeing based on your location. So if you're looking at a building in downtown Baltimore, and suddenly you flip on your augmented reality filter and you see, oh my gosh, this was the building, that Edgar Allan Poe had coffee in on the morning that he died, election or whatever. Just it could be. I really love the idea of using that for history, for architecture, but also just the idea of exploring the world out there without being tethered to a computer, with or a classroom that takes the learning with you wherever you go. And I do think once augmented reality becomes, it's already very prevalent in, on mobile devices, but once it becomes, something you don't even think about wearable technology.
Mhm.
I think the ideas you could have for learning while out in the world, location-based triggers that teach you things that you don't even know you're looking at.
Mhm.
Those are a couple of things that come to mind. You know, I think a big part of what kids need to learn is how to get around in the world, and how to, and part of that could be location-based triggers, whether it's GPS related, or they're in the grocery store and they could look and see which foods have the most
Mhm.
sugar.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
Well, and so much of that, right, is recontextualizing the information, right? Helping you to see it in a new light, provide a new lens.
yeah,
And that's something in the game process you can re-envision, a building, what happened there, who, what was the major event there, rather than just giving you a rote memorization. How do you envision it in a different way?
we wrote
Well,
a
yeah.
proposal once for
Yeah.
downtown Baltimore for the Inner Harbor. It was
Uh-huh.
right before the pandemic, so it didn't get funded. But the idea was, I hope it comes back, that people at Rash Field or Rash Park down at the
Hmm.
harbor would
Hmm.
be able to hold up a tablet and see what Baltimore looked like in various time periods.
Oh, cool.
So it would have a filter that would show, back when the early 1900s, all the way through when
Wow.
the Inner Harbor shopping complex first opened up to today, and
Wow.
then just all the different trees in the park and the historical markers, and
Yeah.
just it was going to be pretty cool, but unfortunately we haven't done it yet.
Well, I hope that comes back. That's awesome. That's really cool. That's really cool. Dave, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your time and helping us unpack this article. Lots of great stuff in here. And thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.